China's return to power, and Mao's bid for redemption by the early 1960s. China had re-emerged as a major world power, commanding global attention as a nuclear-armed communist state with vast human resources and immense economic potential. Yet behind this image of strength lay deep internal scars. The catastrophic failures of the Great Leap Forward and ideologically driven economic campaign had resulted in the deadliest famine in human history, costing tens of millions of lives. These disasters forced Mao Zedong to retreat temporarily from day-to-day governance, sidelined by party leaders who sought stability and recovery. Still, Mao's influence never truly faded. He remained a towering revolutionary symbol, quietly preparing for a political return. In 1964, Mao reasserted his ideological dominance through the publication of quotations from Chairman Mao, soon known worldwide as the Little Red Book. Compact, portable, and written in absolutist language, it distilled Maoist doctrine into 427 authoritative slogans meant to guide every aspect of life. Over the next decade, more than 1 billion copies were printed, making it one of the most widely distributed texts in history, second only to the Bible. For Mao, the book was not merely propaganda. It was a weapon. He believed that revolutionary zeal was fading and that China risked ideological decay. To Mao, stagnation was betrayal. The revolution, he insisted, must remain in constant motion or it would collapse under the weight of bureaucracy and bourgeois thinking. This belief would soon plunge China into one of the most violent and traumatic periods of its modern history. The Cultural Revolution and the rise of the Red Guards in 1966. Mao launched what he called the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, a mass political movement designed to purge China of perceived enemies and restore revolutionary purity. He warned of hidden traitors within the Communist Party itself and urged the nation's youth to rise up and smash the four olds. Old ideas, old culture, and old habits. Students responded with fervor, forming militant groups known as the Red Guards. Wearing red armbands and clutching Mao's Little Red Book, they became the shock troops of ideological enforcement. Mao's most loyal allies enabled this descent into chaos, including Defense Minister Lin Biao, who controlled the military, and Mao's wife, Jiang Qing, who dominated the media and cultural institutions. Millions of Red Guards traveled to Beijing, where Mao personally reviewed them during massive rallies in Tiananmen Square, granting legitimacy to their violence. What followed was an explosion of brutality. Teachers, professors, intellectuals, artists, and officials were publicly humiliated, beaten, tortured, and sometimes killed. Struggle sessions became a feature of daily life, forcing victims to confess imaginary crimes before jeering crowds, often led by former students, colleagues, or even family members. Ancient temples, books, artworks, and historical monuments were destroyed in the name of ideological purity. Within weeks, the chaos spread nationwide. By Mao's 73rd birthday, in December 1966, he openly called for all-round civil war. Revolutionary committees replaced existing institutions, and the military was ordered to support the purges, ushering in an even bloodier phase of the Cultural Revolution. Terror at the top and the destruction of China's leadership as violence intensified. Even China's highest leaders were not spared. The Cultural Revolution quickly turned inward, becoming a tool for Mao to eliminate rivals and consolidate absolute power. Liu Shaoqi, China's head of state and once Mao's successor in waiting, was denounced as a traitor, dragged through public humiliations, imprisoned, and beaten alongside his family. He died in captivity in 1969, broken and forgotten. Another victim was Deng Xiaoping, a pragmatic reformer whose belief in economic modernization clashed with Maoist orthodoxy. Deng was exiled to work in a tractor factory, his brother committed suicide, and his son was tortured and permanently disabled after being thrown from a building. Countless officials met similar fates. Even those who survived bore lasting trauma. Amid this chaos, Premier Zhou Enlai managed a precarious balancing act. Loyal to Mao in public, yet quietly working to preserve the state, Zhou became the regime's stabilizing force. However, his personal life was not spared. His adopted daughter was arrested, tortured, and died in prison. Mao, increasingly paranoid, trusted few people. His relationship with Lin Biao deteriorated into mutual suspicion. In 1971, Lin attempted to flee China but died when his plane crashed in Mongolia. His death triggered further purges within the military. By the early 1970s, the Cultural Revolution had killed hundreds of thousands directly and traumatized tens of millions more. Chinese society was left deeply scarred, fragmented by fear, denunciation, and silence. Diplomacy, decline, and the end of an era as Mao's health deteriorated. Zhou Enlai assumed greater responsibility, particularly in foreign affairs. Under Zhou's guidance, China achieved major diplomatic breakthroughs. In 1971, the United Nations transferred China's seat, including permanent membership on the Security Council from Taiwan to the People's Republic of China, marking Beijing's full return to the global stage. Relations with the Soviet Union, however, remained tense, with deadly border clashes underscoring the depth of the Sino-Soviet split. Seeking strategic balance, Zhou pursued rapprochement with the United States. This culminated in the historic 1972 visit by U.S. President Richard Nixon, a moment that reshaped global geopolitics. The lifting of trade embargoes and renewed dialogue weakened Soviet leverage and signaled China's re-entry into international diplomacy. Yet domestically, tensions remained unresolved. Natural disasters, including catastrophic floods linked to poorly constructed dams from the Great Leap Forward era, exposed the enduring cost of Mao's policies. By 1975, the Communist Party was split between reformers and hardline Mao loyalists, including the notorious Gang of Four, led by Jiang Qing. When Zhou Enlai died in January 1976, after Mao had delayed his medical treatment, the nation erupted in grief. Public mourning in Tiananmen Square transformed into protest, which the state swiftly suppressed. Mao himself died later that year, ending an era that had defined China for nearly 3 decades. Mao's legacy and the reckoning of power. Mao's death plunged China into collective shock. For many citizens, he had been the only leader they had ever known, a revolutionary hero, the great helmsman who had guided China through war and upheaval. The state orchestrated a week of national mourning, urging citizens to transform grief into renewed revolutionary commitment. Yet beneath the reverence lay unresolved trauma. Mao's rule had brought undeniable achievements, national unity, sovereignty, and global recognition, but these were inseparable from catastrophic failures. Ideological rigidity had produced famine, mass persecution, and the near destruction of China's cultural heritage. Veteran communist Chen Yun famously observed that Mao's legacy depended entirely on when history chose to remember him. With Mao gone, his designated successor, Hu Guofeng, moved swiftly to consolidate power while maintaining Mao's symbolic authority. His most decisive act came in October 1976, when the Gang of Four were arrested and later convicted for the violence of the Cultural Revolution. By placing blame on them, the party preserved Mao's image while quietly closing the chapter on radical Maoism. It was a political compromise, one that allowed China to move forward without openly condemning its founding leader. Deng Xiaoping. In the dawn of a new China, from the ruins of Mao's final years emerged Deng Xiaoping, a survivor of purges and exile, now restored to power. By the late 1970s, Deng had become the de facto leader of China, driven by a clear-eyed assessment of national failure. China was poor, technologically backward, and institutionally broken. Universities had been closed, expertise purged, and infrastructure neglected. Deng rejected ideological purity in favor of practical reform, famously declaring that it did not matter whether a cat was black or white, so long as it caught mice. Reviving Zhou Enlai's vision of the 4 modernizations: agriculture, industry, science, and defense. Deng opened China to foreign ideas, investment, and technology. Students were sent abroad. Markets cautiously reintroduced. These decisions would unleash one of the most dramatic economic transformations in world history. While Deng never disavowed Mao outright, he decisively broke from Maoist extremism. In doing so, he reshaped China's future, turning a traumatized revolutionary state into a rising global power. The legacy of Mao Zedong would remain contested, but the path forward, pragmatic, reformist, and outward-looking, had been irrevocably set.